Link in comments below. Continue listening for a brief sample.
It's time to close, my dear. Emily Sanderson nodded reluctantly as the librarian stepped past her seat and headed to the handful of other occupied chairs. This late at night, only a handful of people remained in the library, either intent on reading or simply because they had nowhere else to go. The library was small and rarely more than half full, even at the best of times. Emily loved it because it was her refuge. She, too, had nowhere else to go. She stood and gathered her books, returning them to the trolley for reshelving. The librarian was a kindly old man. He'd certainly not asked any questions when the younger Emily had started to read well above her grade level, but he got grumpy when visitors tried to return books to the shelves themselves. Not that she could really blame him. Readers had a habit of returning the books to the wrong places, causing mistakes that tended to snowball until the entire shelf was out of order. And Emily hated to see poor Rupert grumpy. He was one of the few people she felt she could rely on. Most teenage girls her age would never crack open a history book unless they were looking for the answers to some test. Emily had fallen in love with history from a very early age, taking refuge in it from the trials and tribulations of her life. Reading about the lives of famous people, their struggles to change the world, made her feel her universe had a past, even if it didn't have a future. Perhaps she would have made a good historian one day, if she'd known where to start working towards a history degree. But she already knew she would never find a proper life. She knew what happened to most graduates these days. They graduated from college, they celebrated, and then they couldn't find a job. Her stepfather had certainly made it clear to her, after an endless series of arguments about what she wanted to do with her life, that she would never do anything worthwhile with her life.
"You'll never amount to anything,"
he'd told Emily one drunken night.
"You won't even be able to flip burgers at McDonald's."
Her mother should never have married again, but she'd been lonely after Emily's father had vanished from their lives, so long ago that Emily barely remembered him. Emily's stepfather, she refused to call him father, had never laid a finger on her, yet he hadn't hesitated to tear down her confidence every chance he could, or to verbally rip her to shreds. He resented Emily, and Emily had no idea why. She didn't even know why he stayed with a woman he clearly didn't love. Emily caught sight of her own reflection in one of the windows and winced inwardly. She didn't really recognize the girl looking back at her. Long brown hair framed a face too narrow to be classically pretty, with pale skin and dark eyes that looked somehow mournful against her skin. Her clothes were shapeless, hiding her figure. She rarely bothered with makeup, or